Hello, everyone. This is Kripa Anand, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are diving into the biggest mistake companies make in 2026, not AI adoption, but rushing to implement new tools without really understanding the core business problem they're meant to solve. Moving from experimentation to impact demands more than just technology. It requires a fundamental shift in leadership, strategy, and culture. Joining us today is Chris Dore, the CEO of ScarlettNova and founder of Rogue Ventures. Chris is a unique voice in the tech landscape, a Perplexity Business Fellow, a coordinator at Algonquin College's BME program, and a veteran entrepreneur who has lived and worked in South Korea, Calgary, and Ottawa. With a master's with a focus on applied AI from Carleton University and a background in everything from international business to Brazilian jiu jitsu. Chris brings a disciplined, no nonsense approach to disruptive technology. So, before further ado, let's welcome this special guest. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Kripa. It's really great. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
So am I. Now, Chris, you've seen business spends, millions on AI tools only to realize they didn't have a clear problem to solve. So please go ahead and explain what AI adoption mistakes do companies make and why is AI powerful only with strong expertise? Go ahead.
That's an amazing question. Well, the truth is that one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is thinking that AI is a shortcut to expertise. They assume that if they buy the tool, they have bought the capability. But in reality, AI actually just amplifies whatever already exists inside the organization. So good judgment or bad judgment, clear processes or messy ones, strong strategy or confusion. So the companies that struggle the most are usually the one making one of three mistakes. First, they chase hype instead of solving real business problems. Second, they delegate AI to one department instead of treating it as an organization-wide capability. And third, they also underestimate the importance of that human expertise. AI can generate output quickly, as we all know, but it can't replace context, leadership, judgment, or deep understanding of customer or industry or workflow. So, and for us, it's really good from our perspective when you have experience, because when you have experience, AI ends up becoming more like, I always call it steroids for somebody with expertise. It allows us to really, really leverage our own knowledge base to get things done more efficiently and make better decision making. So it's pretty powerful across the board.
Yeah. Well, it's a powerful distinction that AI exemplifies and amplifies existing talent rather than replacing the need for it. And that human touch, where it's needed, no one can replace that. Great. Now, Chris, the focus turns to how Rogue Ventures is accelerating dual usage innovation. So, go ahead and explain the story of why did you launch Rogue Ventures and how exactly is a venture studio different from an accelerator? How would you position that?
Well, thank you so much for that question. It's interesting because in Canada, there's really only like 35 venture studios.
Hmm.
So it's actually a model that isn't really as well known. And often we get confused with accelerators, right?
Yeah.
The largest difference is that accelerators, usually the entrepreneur comes in and that entrepreneur has an existing business idea. And the accelerator really, really helps them, right? In terms of providing mentorship, connections and such.
Right.
A venture studio is much more hands-on. When we generate for our venture studio, we primarily generate our ideas internally, and we take full ownership of it, right? So what we end up doing is we are much more hands-on. It is not just mentorship; it is basically the creation of companies, and that's a big difference, right? Um, that's probably the largest difference.
Right, very well articulated. I understand that acting as a co-founder, rather than just a sponsor, clearly de-risks the journey, from a great idea to a scalable business. So thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So no. So like really, it's about intentional company creation, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to combine entrepreneurship, strategic design, and operational support to give ideas a stronger chance of becoming real successful businesses.
Right. That's great. Now, Chris, let's shift our attention to the mental resilience that is required to build, at hyper speed. For a lot of founders, the journey really begins from the mindset, right? So, how has your global journey shaped your approach to entrepreneurial mental health? Because this is much needed, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be very interested in getting to the deeper of this.
Well, that's well, once again an amazing question. Mental health, especially amongst entrepreneurs, no matter where you are, is something that really needs to be taken into consideration. Like I've lived in North America, I've been in Europe, I've been in Asia, and founders or business owners of any sort carry on an extra amount of stress.
Yeah.
It's like I call this stress sandwich, and there's always an extra piece of stress for anybody that's entrepreneurial. So in my view, my international experience and my focus on mental health has made me more human centered in about how I actually think about entrepreneurial success. I don't view mental health as separate from performance. I see it as foundational to it. So if a founder is exhausted, disconnected, or constantly operating from stress, it eventually affects decision making and leadership and relationships. So it is. I cannot emphasize how important it is. It also taught me mental health is it when you take care of your mental health, it also allows you to bring some more resiliency and toughness to the path, I guess, of
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. It allows you to get some self-reliance, self-awareness, allows you to really focus on community recovery and the ability to keep moving without losing yourself in the process. I also believe strongly that we need to normalize the conversation more, especially around mental health in entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
because often in different societies and in North American society, we often celebrate too much that grind, and we really talk about the cost of that grind.
Yeah. No, that's again a very timely reminder because balancing physical discipline with the mental chaos of a startup is clearly the only way to ensure long term sustainability as a leader. And especially as a leader, when you're in that position, only if your mental health is at a position where you're able to give back to the community, to everyone who is working under you, only then you'll be able to have a flourished business. So thank you so much for that. Before,
Yeah,
yeah.
I 100% agree with what you just said because it's all about taking care of yourself so you can
Yeah,
take care of others, right?
exactly. Yes. Before we go any further, here's a special message for all of our listeners, especially to all the founders who are listening to this. The most important asset in your business isn't your code or your AI model, it's your mental health. In 2026, we are moving faster than ever. And if you aren't protecting your internal bandwidth, you will burn out before you break through. So don't wait for a crisis to start prioritizing your well being, whether it's jiu-jitsu, mentorship, or just stepping away from the screen. Find your anchor today. Now, coming back to you, Chris. Now, let's look at why AI adoption is ultimately a change management challenge. So, AI is not even a buzzword anymore. Every business is trying to integrate it in some way or the other and, get under this AI radar. So, how can organizations adopt AI responsibly without overwhelming their teams?
Well, I think you nailed it. That it's AI is just a tool, and
Yeah.
AI adoption is 100% about change management, especially when you have staff and employees that are using it. So most teams are not overwhelmed by AI itself in a sense. They're
Mhm.
overwhelmed by unclear expectations,
Yeah.
too many tools because that's often people always grab all the tools and be like, "Oh, what are we going to do with it?" Poor communication and lack of practical guidance. So, in my view, responsible adoption starts small and stays grounded in the business priorities. Instead of asking everyone to like, we're changing everything overnight, you should identify those few high value cases, run focus pilots, measure impact, and ultimately build confidence over time.
Yeah.
So that is really what you need to do. We see a lot of companies out there though, however, they're just grabbing the tools and they're like, how do we use this? And often they don't get the adoption that they want or they're unsuccessful.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think when the workforce feels empowered by the technology rather than threatened by it, the adoption rate, the ROI, everything skyrockets. That's amazing to know.
Yeah. There's another thing that I always talk about is that
Yeah,
you know how when everyone first got Excel, like back in the day, and
right.
like we only scrape the bottom of Excel. Like some people will and then some people get really into Excel. And the ones that really did well with Excel were people that actually received training. And that's another piece that I find that companies really start to need to really start thinking about spending money on the training so that they not just scraping the bottom of the barrel with the tools. They're actually
Right.
using the tools to the maximum capacity.
No, of course, because it's as overwhelming for the company and for the employees as well, because they've been trained to do work a certain way, and when you shift that, the momentum changes, the workflow changes, everything changes, and of course, you need good leadership and good time to get used to it and deliver results accordingly. Uh, Great. Now, finally, the conversation moves to how you are preparing the next generation of founders. So, from the extensive experience that you've had, Chris, I'm sure you've talked to so many people, learned so many lessons. So, what are some of the key lessons that you are teaching students about succeeding in an AI-driven world?
Well, that's an awesome question again, and I love the question because I love my students, and I worry about my students now because AI, as I mentioned before, helps people with expertise. But if you don't
Yeah.
have that expertise, there's a whole bunch of challenges. So what I like to try to teach students is that the tools will change, but the ability to think really always matters. So in an AI-driven world, your value doesn't come from knowing how to press button. It comes from knowing how to ask better questions, evaluate ideas, critically communicate clearly, and apply those judgment in complex situations. I want students to really understand that AI should be making them more capable, not more passive. I want students to start using it. I encourage usage. Um, I think I think what I really try to motivate them to do to be more adaptable, more curious, and also once again grounded into using these tools to really solve problems.
Very well answered. I think instilling a learning never stops mindset is the best way to prepare future leaders for a world where the only constant is change. And that's a great reminder as well. Now, Chris, let's do a little time travel. Imagine we have a time machine and, we are traveling 5 to 10 years from now. When we get off that time machine, how exactly do you envision the Canadian ecosystem changing with AI and everything that's happening with the geopolitical scenario as well?
Well, you're hitting that. That's the hardest question of this. Ah, that's a if I had a crystal ball, I don't know. That's a really tough question because part of me is an optimist, and the optimist believes that we're going to create this beautiful world using, the current technology and that soon to be more advanced technology.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to make life better. But there's another piece of me that says we're going to struggle with the changes. Um, and that kind of brings me back to my students because I am fearful of because those entry level jobs are the ones that are probably the easiest to I don't want to say replace per se, but yeah, potentially replace. The other side of it too, when it comes to businesses, I believe that startups that have an AI first mindset, they're well positioned because they can start with the foundation. Legacy companies that have been around, 4 or 5, 10 years, they're going to have challenges because they're not big enough, like that big enterprise, to have big teams to
Yeah.
support them with this change, and they lack resources. So for me, I think the startups and I think the enterprise with them who have a ton of resources are going to be okay. It's those middle, medium-sized companies that are going to probably struggle the most. And whenever I go to a client, I say, I kind of do the matrix thing where there's a red
Yeah.
pill and a blue pill. Red pill, we can layer on AI, right?
Yeah.
But reality, what's going to happen in 5 years or it happening now and in the future is that we're going to be redesigning business models and whole business
Mhm.
using AI. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, you've painted quite a picture there. The future definitely looks promising, but as you said, it comes with its own unique set of challenges. And let's just hope that Canada is well prepared to handle that. I'm loving this conversation, Chris, and definitely we'd love to have you back. But before we let you go, if there's one final piece of advice that you have for all the entrepreneurs out there who are still hesitating, to take that first step and who feel behind in AI, what would you tell them and why?
I'm going to steal from Nike, right? And I think I've heard this probably on your podcast before. Just do it, right? Like
Just do it. Yeah.
the technology has allowed entrepreneurs to build quickly, right? Um, I think that my advice on that is start building, but also realize the importance of research, talking to customers, so important. And then on the other side, I'm believing that go-to-market strategy is going to be a differentiator, more even with more importance in the future because building
Yeah.
will be easier.
No, that is a great reminder to, focus on the problem and not the noise. That was Chris Dore. You heard him. Just do it. Thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was great. I appreciate it.
All right, that was Chris Dore from ScarlettNova and Rogue Ventures. A vital reminder that in 2026, the most disruptive technology in the world still requires human expertise, ethics, and a healthy mind to succeed. To all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more such resources. And lastly, a very special thank you to our podcast partners, UPS, Google, and ADP, our HR partner, for their ongoing commitment to empowering small businesses across Canada. See you guys in the next episode. Kripa Anand signing off.